Welcome back to Rider Guide. Today I have the KBO K1 for you, and this is what KBO calls the best choice for your first e-bike. Now, generally speaking, folding e-bikes are a really great choice for your first e-bike. They're easy to carry around without having to buy a bike rack. They accommodate all shapes and sizes of riders, and they're generally a really good way to get comfortable with an e-bike if you've never ridden one before. Now, the big question is this a good folding e-bike to consider, or should you look elsewhere? In this review, I'm gonna go through all the features, all the components. We're gonna take it for a ride on-road. We're gonna take it for a little bit of a ride off-road as well to test out this suspension and the tires a little bit. And then I will give you my conclusion and tell you if it's any good. So let's jump right into it. Let's start off by looking at the components and features on this bike. Starting off, you have 20-inch wheels, which is pretty typical for folding e-bikes. I think that's a theme you'll see in this video, is that kind of what you get on this bike is what's typical at the price. You kind of expect a certain level on folding bikes. You know, I've reviewed so many, and this kind of just checks all those boxes of what you want and what you expect at $800. It has your two folding points here on the frame and then one on the handlebars. I'll show that process in a second of actually folding it down. You get an adjustable seat post and adjustable handlebars using these quick releases here. You get a very basic 7-speed Shimano drivetrain. You get front and rear mechanical disc brakes. About 30 millimeters of travel on this front suspension fork here. Front and rear metal fenders to cover up water spray and dirt spray and that kind of stuff. You get a rear rack, which can take 25 kilograms or about 60 pounds of weight. A pretty basic cockpit with your usual stuff. You've got your thumb throttle here. You've got a pretty decent display. It's actually really visible in bright light, which is something that I like. You have your 7-speed shifter over here, and then a pretty basic set of slide-on grips that don't move around too much. You get a 500-watt rear hub motor with a claimed top speed of 20 miles an hour and a claimed climbing angle of 30 degrees. It's a 48-volt battery, 10.4 amp-hour capacity. It's really nice to see a 48-volt battery rather than 36. They didn't cut any corners there. That gives you 500 watt hours total capacity and a claimed range of 45 miles. I imagine we'll probably get about half that in the highest riding mode. Here's a quick demo on how to fold this thing up, just so you can kind of see how difficult it is and how small it can get. And there you go. That should give you an idea of how small it can get. That should fit in pretty much any SUV. You might be able to squeeze it into a sedan and obviously in any truck or anything like that without needing a bike rack. Let's jump on it now and see how it actually feels to ride around and do a few of those tests that I was talking about. Okay, before I talk about ride quality, let's do a top speed test real quick. I'll have the GPS data up on the screen. 3, 2, 1, go. Start off with a little throttle here. This is a Class 2 e-bike, which means it's a top speed of 20 miles an hour. So I'd imagine it has a limiter on it, but maybe not. I'm showing 23, 24 miles an hour with a little bit of downhill. And that's gonna be about your top speed there. So just based on usually what this displays versus actual GPS speed, I would guess about 21 miles an hour, which seem to be on par with Class 2 bikes. You know, they're 20 mile an hour bikes, but the limiter typically will max out somewhere around 21, unless of course you have a stretch of downhill or whatever. So two things you'll notice right off the bat when you start riding is that one is that the motor is pretty loud, and the vibration from the motor causes these the front and back fenders to kind of vibrate a little bit, which is kind of one reason that I don't personally like metal, aluminum fenders. And the other thing you'll notice is that there is a little bit of a delay. So when you start pedaling, I found that I have to do almost 2 full pedal strokes before the motor will kick in. But when the motor does kick in, it's quite strong in this highest mode and does a really decent job of shooting you off of the line, like actually giving you the power that you want, which is, characteristic of hub motors. If you want a very natural riding feel, then that's what Mid-drive motors are for, but you typically don't find those until you start spending about $2,000 to $2,500. So compared to other folding e-bikes at this price, that's pretty par for the course. A pretty sudden motor start and a little bit of a delay on those pedal strokes. Overall, the bike feels really solid. You know, other than a little bit of rear motor noise and vibration from the fenders, it's not really loud or jingly or anything like that. The drivetrain doesn't seem to be rattling around at all. For me, a 6'1" rider, this does feel a little bit small under me. And, you know, they are 20-inch wheels, but I have ridden other folding e-bikes that have a little bit, you know, feel a little bit more bulky and solid under me. That's not to say that this is rattly in any way. It just definitely does have like a smaller, skinnier feel to it. So as is usually the case, you get 5 riding modes. So I'll showcase those now. So you've got mode 1, which is your lowest mode, which typically reflects what it would feel like if you were riding this bike with no assistance, right? Actually, probably a little bit harder even. So if I go up into 2, that's about what it would feel like if you were riding with no motor assistance. If you're riding with actually no motor assistance, it is very hard to pedal these e-bikes without any sort of motor assistance. Now going up to 3, this is when you start to feel like the bike's actually pushing you along. And probably if I pedaled hard enough, I could get it up close to 20 miles an hour. But it seems to be capping out around 15, which for most people will be more than enough and should extend your battery life significantly. You got mode 4, and as is typically the case with these, modes 4 and 5 aren't a humongous difference. You typically can get up to the top speeds in mode 4, but let's check this out. Okay, it seems to be actually capping it at 16 or 17 miles an hour. So you're actually going to get a different experience in the different riding modes. And then you have mode 5, which is obviously the absolute max motor power. Like I said, this is a 500 watt motor, which a lot of times you see like 250 to 350 watt motors at this price. So that is something that this bike is doing really well, is offering a lot of power and hopefully offering a lot of really good hill climbing power. The other thing that these smaller bikes do well, and that this one seems to be doing well too, is just overall nimbleness, you know, ability to steer this around. No matter who you are, your experience level, or how big you are, you should be able to control this bike really well. Okay, let's move into a little bit of dirt path riding. I'm gonna stay in mode 5, and you do get some pretty knobby tires here, and there should be a reasonable amount of power, so we should be able to do all of this off-roading path here. Obviously anything beyond this you're gonna want a bigger bike for, but if you have a trail around your house, kind of like this one, that has dirt, you shouldn't have any issues with it. Giving the brakes a little bit of a test here. They are mechanical instead of hydraulic, and you do very occasionally, it's very rare, but you can occasionally find hydraulic brakes at this price. Typically, you kind of got to go closer to like $1,000. So cable brakes are pretty par for the course. They're not my favorite, but you know, they get the job done at the speeds that this bike goes. Suspension wise, you know, you get a little bit of travel, but in all honesty, it's not doing a ton. The wheels are going to be what's doing most of the heavy lifting when it comes to handling obstacles and bumps and stuff, but getting a little suspension is better than nothing for sure. Lastly, you have your throttle here, which is honestly probably how I would primarily use this bike. Throttle's pretty decent, you know, it's quick enough, and the throttle can go the same speed as pedaling, which isn't always the case. Sometimes you can go faster with pedaling than you can with your throttle, but in this case, you can just use your throttle like you would pedaling. So overall, as is usually the case with these KBO bikes, you're getting pretty much exactly what you pay for. I don't think this bike has any glaring weaknesses. I don't think it necessarily does anything exceptional at the price, but it does exactly what you'd want it to do at the price. So if you like this bike or want to check it out or look at the colors or whatever, you can do that down below in the description. Thanks for coming along with me on this quick review of the KBO K1. You can subscribe if you want to see more e-bikes. We've got lots of cool stuff on the horizon, as well as a folding e-bike comparison. So if you're in the market for a folding e-bike and you can't decide on one, we will be comparing all the ones we've tested up to this point and an additional few that we haven't yet fully reviewed. We're going to be doing all that in a video very soon. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.